Hey, welcome back to the Sentinel Lab series, where I take you through the 8 different modules from the free lab guide available online. In this session, I'm talking about Module 7, Threat Intelligence. If you do like this sort of content, make sure you subscribe and leave a like. If you dislike, make sure you comment and let me know why that is. Awesome, let's dive in. Okay, so in this module, we're covering Threat Intelligence. This is Module 7. So the way Sentinel works is it can integrate with different threat intelligence services to enhance its indicator compromise so that you can hunt utilizing these threat indicators, much like what you would do with your XDR platform, for example, or other SIEMs. We have covered some of that before, but I just want to provide an update. So how do we connect to threat intelligence platforms first and foremost? First, we need to go to Content Hub, and we need to ensure that we have the threat intelligence solutions configured. Right, so let me go ahead and look for threat intelligence. So we can see over here, we have the threat intelligence module. I'm aware my camera is right on top of it, but I just want to make sure that we are understanding here what is included in this platform. So let me go ahead and click on install for threat intelligence. So when I install threat intelligence, again, this is a solution from Content Hub. What I'm adding is a number of different content types into my platform. For example, you can see here a summary of all the content type that's included in this threat intelligence. So analytic rules that leverage different threat intelligence modules. We have 4 data connectors. That's what we're after, particularly speaking for threat intelligence. We have hunting queries and workbooks. Now, once we install it, we can manage and start tweaking and configuring some of these content, right? So the first thing I want to do is ensure that the content here is enabled. So Threat Intelligence Upload Indicators API is enabled. So when we're leveraging different methods of integration, one of them is API, one of them might be taxi. It's important that we set this up so that we allow our tenant to receive indicators via API. And as you can see here, the instructions, you have to create an Azure Active Directory token so that you create an application that will ingest that API and send information through that API. You have all the information required for you to follow along here. I'm not going to cover this today, but there's also some very good public guides on tech community on how to get that done. Something else that I want to look at is the taxi feed. Let me open up that connector for us to have a look as well. So if you do have a taxi feed, so a threat intelligence paid generally, or even a free threat intelligence feed that sends data through taxi, you can configure that connection through this page. And then you just have to enter your settings here: friendly name, API, URL, collection ID, username, password, and so on and so forth. We also have the availability here and the option to just enable Defender Threat Intelligence for different log sources. So essentially with this connector, we're allowing it to import IOCs from Microsoft Defender Threat Intelligence into Sentinel. Microsoft Defender Threat Intelligence is a separate solution, separate product that has its own license, but I will just enable it because there is no harm in doing that. Now at this stage, what we can do is enable analytics rules that will map threat intelligence to specific tables, right? So it will cross-reference information from my threat intelligence that I've ingested into Sentinel, cross-reference that with different tables and log sources in Sentinel. So within this Content Hub, this is where we can essentially go through a list of all different analytics rules that can do that for us. So if you onboarded DNS events on your data connectors page, you'd have to enable this analytics rule in order to make full use of it. If you are leveraging Office activity, you should enable this one here. Essentially what I want to ensure is that I am at least mapping out some of these TI maps, IP entities or URL or whatever entities with specific data tables from my environment. So I'm going to review here reveal everything that is possible in my environment and enable whatever is possible. Possibility being this one here, TI map IP entity to sign-in logs. Since I'm ingesting AAD logs, this is a possibility for me. So I'm going to click in here. I can see that I have some threat intelligence logs in there. I did have a lot of disconnected sources that are required for this analytic rule, but I'll still enable it. There we go. Closing it twice, but it takes me back to the threat intelligence section. Let me reveal it once more. And I would have done the same for other analytics rules as required. Okay, with that all done, I can understand that this is somewhat enabled in my environment, so I can continue with the setup of one of these sources. In my example, I have access to Alienvault's free OTX platform. So I create an account, I have an API key, and so on and so forth. So I have to integrate that with Sentinel. The way to achieve this is by creating a logic app. So I'm navigating to my automation page, and then active playbooks, and I can see here that I have one active playbook that is enabled for Alienvault. So if I click on this particular logic app, I've been testing and trying and configuring it, and finally got to a stage where this is actually working. So right now I'm going into my logic app designer, and I'm running a trigger to make sure that the MyFlow is able to talk to the OTX platform, receive an API request with threat intelligence, parse that properly, ingest that into an API call that is being sent out to Microsoft Sentinel security graph or Microsoft security graph. When I test this all out, you can see here that yes, all the processes part of my logic app have been concluded successfully. So this is essentially working for the use cases that were triggered when I clicked on trigger. So if I click on each one of these phases here, I can learn more about the raw inputs that happened throughout each stage. So I can see the results here of the graph post requests that I made. I can see the status code and so on and so forth. Once you do that and you have your integration working properly, all your indicators of compromise are going to be added to a Sentinel table called threat intelligence. So when you consume tables in Sentinel, you know we've done this before. You can go to the log section and query that in many ways. So you can create customizable queries that will leverage that threat intelligence in many ways. For example, if I wanted to learn more about this table, I can just query threat intelligence indicator get schema. That will send me the schema reference of that particular table. So I can learn more about the different columns that this table contains, the different expectations that I can add to it. So threat types containing strings. For example, I can state the active state of indicators of compromise. I can state the malware names, known false positives, there's tags. If there are email source domains that are part of your IOCs that are potentially put into that column as well, file types, file size, file names, network information such as IPv4, so URL. So all these kind of indicators of compromise are going to be loaded in this table here. If I want to take a look at what's currently my table, I can take an example of 10 entries, for example. So I can pull it this way. As you can see here, I have a range of indicators that are loaded into this table of mine already. Some of them, as you can see here at the top, some of them are unknown. These were manually created at some point by me. I also have here an example of integration with OTX. So that's just worked, right? And we also have here some other examples from Microsoft here, from Mystic Honeypot, for example. So these are all different indicators of compromise that have been added to my platform just as we speak, right? So I was enabling those data connectors, and then I ran that trigger on my logic app, and that all started filling in my threat intelligence table in real time because I hadn't tested this before. So that's really exciting. So this is one way to consume these threat indicators, and naturally using KQL, you can tweak your queries to fill in and compare specific tables with specific columns and values and create matchings that way, leverage all the analytics rules that are doing that for us in some shape, way, or forms, like I mentioned before. But there's also a UI built on top of this. Let's navigate to it now. So here I am in my Sentinel dashboard once again. On the left-hand side here under Threat Management, we have what we call the Threat Intelligence section. And Threat Intelligence is where we can see graphically all the different indicators of compromise that have been included to my table, essentially, and to my platform. So you can see here that we have a range of many different indicators of compromise here. Some are coming from Microsoft Threat Intelligence, as you can see here. Some others are coming from the security graph, from Microsoft Security Graph. So you can check out the sources table for that. And they have confidence levels. So confidence levels are essentially ways for you to gauge from 0 to 100 how confident you are that this is a valid IOC, right? Now we can filter this table as we wish. So we can filter depending on the type of indicators of compromise. I only have IPv4. That's why I can only see this option here in this drop-down box. I can filter by source as well and by threat type as well. So if I had the threat type created and added to each one of these entries when I loaded them up, and then when I ingested them, I would be able to filter this out as well. I can also filter by expiration date. I've mentioned, but it's stating when you're creating an IOC and when it's supposed to expire is a good practice for for maintaining a healthy threat intelligence database in Sentinel. For each entry, we have here on the right hand side the summary section, naturally, where you can validate what each one of these are and what each one of them refer to. So all of these that have been imported by Microsoft, you can see the tags, you can see the values, the source reference value there, which is a botnet IP address, for example. It has a confidence, it has a pattern. You can understand when it was created. So this is today's date and when it's valid, up until when it's valid as well. Valid for a few hours, as you can see here, about 5 hours. So that's just a rule that came from the data connector. It also tells me how many alerts we have that are triggering based on that. Now the alerts requires analytics rules to be set up properly, right? Which I have not done so in my environment. I would need to take some time to do that. But you should definitely do it in your environment. Now let me take another example from a different source, from OTX, right? So this particular IOC here is coming from OTX. OTX is Alienvault's data source in threat intelligence information. So this is what it looks like from that perspective. Now these are some indicators of threat indicators. What I do want to do though is teach you how to add manual indicators of compromise. So if you don't have automated threat intelligence ingestion like I did just now, what you'll have to do is leverage the manual information or menu addition. So up here at the top, you have the button to add new. When you click on it, you get the new indicator blade here on the right hand side. And you can just state what kind of indicator you're creating. So for example, if I wanted to block a domain in my environment, I could just add a domain name and add the domain here. For example, phishing.com. I could add the tag as well, state that this is related to incident number X or Y. I can add a threat type. This is a domain threat type and a botnet, for example. Even if there's an APT behind this, I could add the APT information. I can add description name for it. I can state the confidence level from 0 up to 100, like I mentioned before. If there are queue chain phases, I can add the phase and the information in here. And of course, the validity of it. So let's create it for 1 day. When I apply this, it's going to be added to the table here at the top. There we go. So with his, you see that we have the value here set up for phishing.com, which is the email. Now, if I pull my table again from the log source, which I'll do just now, you can see here that I've summarized that table by threat type. We have 2 unknown threat types. We have some that are botnet. We have watch lists that are coming from the OTX integration. And I have one phishing type, the one that I just added manually. So you can see how you can tweak and customize these queries in many different ways, using different columns and different information from the threat intelligence that you just fed into Sentinel. Now let's quickly go over how to easily find analytics rules that have relevant information to threat intelligence that you could enable in your environment. So let me navigate to analytics rules at the bottom. Over here I have all the active rules, but I also have the rule templates. Let me add a filter for data sources, and in here I want to add for threat intelligence. So under threat intelligence I have taxi, and I have MDTI, Microsoft Defender for Threat Intelligence. I also have that threat intelligence platforms, which is still being deprecated, but I'll add this in here. When I create this filter, I can see the results of all the templates, rule templates that I can add to my environment based on these data sources. So I have a handful of these in here. Well, some of them are enabled already. So this is another way that you can look at all your different data sources that relate to threat intelligence from a rule templates perspective and manually find which one that interests to you. For example, for office activity, you can check what sources you have that are valid for that particular analytics rule, and if it caters your use cases, you can go ahead and create these rules. In my environment, I have these data sources from Microsoft 365 Defender who could benefit from integrating with this threat intelligence indicator. So TI map IP entity to network session events. So let me go ahead and go create rule. Then I can validate what this rule is for, what tactics and techniques from MITRE ATT&CK this caters for. This is part of impact. Then I can double check the rule logic. If I wanted to, I can test with my current data. Some things we have done before, right? So I can tweak and ensure that the query scheduling amount of time is part of what I'm after as part of my SOC process. And if I wanted to customize that, I could. I can customize what a match to this rule would mean in terms of incident, for example. So I can create incidents when alerts triggered by this analytic rule are found in my environment. I can group alerts. I can automate response. And then finally, at the end, it's going to validate all of my settings and configuration and allow me to save and enable this in my environment. This is exactly what I've done. And now I'm taken to the active rules section where I can double check and yes, confirm that the rule that I just went through is enabled here in fact. So I know that from now onward, that particular use case is catered for in my environment for those data sources that I've double checked. The last thing I want to cover is workbooks. Workbooks are a way for us to graphically visualize data in Sentinel in whatever ways we want. When I onboarded threat intelligence solutions, I added the threat intelligence workbook to my list here. Now, when I select that particular workbook, on the right-hand side here, we have a summary of what it means and what it includes, and I can view a template for it. Let me go ahead and click on View Template. And this here is the template of that workbook. So this is a look at what this workbook is going to tell me. Right, so I can see real time it pulling some information, some indicators ingestion in my environment, the different tables that it would tell me, active indicators by indicator type. Here I have 4,000 of them. I have a number of Microsoft Sentinel manually created, some from OTX integration, and a number from Microsoft Defender Threat Intelligence that are part of my tables. This is actively pulling my threat intelligence table and telling me all these results. And I can see by confidence score as well. So I could potentially here make some customizations to help what kind of information is shown to me. I could change time range, change workspaces, change subscriptions, and so on and so forth. Now in my environment, I do like this this workbook, so I wanted to enable and make it available under my workbooks. So let's go ahead and do that. So I need to go back to the workbooks page and I can save it. When I save it, I'm going to create this workbook, potentially in a Sentinel or Microsoft location. If there are charges that need to be taken against a storage account, that is also part of the setup here. Now, when I save it, I have this workbook available under the My Workbooks table here. There we go. So I have 2 workbooks created in my account, in my environment. So when I click on this one that's part of my workbooks, I can view this saved workbook. So I have more options here. So at the top here, you can see that I have the option to edit, to open it up, to save, refresh, share this, pin it somewhere, and I can even state how often I want to refresh the information in this workbook. So you can see that I have more authority to do things in here. So if you have a KQL query that you want to add to this workbook, you can do that. Let's do exactly that. Let's click on Edit. And at the very bottom, when I click on Edit, by the way, you can see that I have different sections in here that I can add them all. So I could modify the looks, I could modify however it presents information to me, what kind of data it presents to me, I can modify everything. What I want to do is at the bottom, add a query. At the very bottom, I have the Add button. I want to click on it and then click on Add Query. So in the query, I want to add that particular query that I showcased to you before. Let me go ahead and run this query. There you go. I just ran it. I know it works. So I am going to add a visualization bar to it, because not only do I want to see, I just don't want to see the text. I want to actually see this in a bar chart. Let me go ahead and choose graphical representation or visualization, and then let me choose bar chart. There you go. You can see that it changed the result in real time to a bar chart. And now I can have a visual representation of my query that I just created through KQL. And when I do and click on Done Editing and Done Editing again, that query is now part of my workbook. So this is how I customize a workbook for threat intelligence. With all this said and done, this is the end of Module 7. Okay, so hopefully you found this informative. And in this video, we've gone through how to set up threat intelligence in Sentinel. So we covered the basics of threat intelligence in Sentinel, what kind of protocols it supports and ways of integrating with your threat intelligence. We went through how to configure logic app for Alienvault, for example, very briefly. There's much more to talk about that. We also had a look at how to enable data connectors in Sentinel for threat intelligence, what this integration looks like in part of the dashboard through the UI, and how to consume it via a table. And we also had a look at how to manually create the threat intelligence and then how to consume it via workbook. So it was a handful. Hopefully you found this informative. If you did, make sure you subscribe and like the video. And I appreciate your time. See you next time.